banks are collapsing in America, and with interest rates having climbed very rapidly to 5-6%, I see a systemic collapse.
Sam Altman, who's the CEO, founder of OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, has been very vocal about his desire to democratize his technology more, to actually give it away, and has been actually following through with a lot of those promises to kind of open up the technology for the average layperson to use. I suppose the question there about that kind of active democratizing or attempt to democratize is twofold. Firstly, is that just spin? Is it good advertising for him to say, look, I'm giving this to the people, and so therefore I don't have as much responsibility when everything goes wrong? Or is it actually a valiant effort to spread this technology out towards people who need it most? That's kind of where I'm interested here, is how are we going to convince those people who run those behemoth businesses? We can't just take them down. There is actually no guardrail that can be put up currently because of the way in which the technology is rapidly self-producing at this point. So what do we say to them that convinces them to democratize in a way that's positive rather than just spin, as you call it?
Well, I think it's going to happen. I agree with you. Voluntarily, it's unlikely to happen. But my view, looking at the world as it is now, is it's unstable. And the banks are collapsing. James has an expertise in banks. The banks are collapsing in America. And with interest rates having climbed very rapidly to 5-6%, I see a systemic collapse. So the question you asked, I think, well, they're not going to voluntarily change. But if, as I believe, there's going to be a systemic collapse because trust has gone. We don't trust each other. The banks won't trust each other, a bit like in 2008 when there was only a small problem with subprime, and suddenly all the banks stopped trusting each other, and we almost had a complete, but lending stopped for a period, and they had to reignite it. Now, where we don't know whether banks are solvent because of the treasuries are now being written down, not being marked to market, so banks' balance sheets are bust. Their actual loans are bust because suddenly they were all lent at 1 or 2%, and now it's 6%. So what's going to happen, in my view, is we're very close to banks not trusting each other. Mm-hmm. And once that happens, money stops working. When money stops working, we have to re-look at the whole way society operates, which is then the opportunity to look back at what our purpose is. Then, if we don't leave it to the elites, we say, no, we as people have to get involved in discussions as to what our true purpose is. Then you get the kind of reset that we need to happen. And then we're not going to be in the hands of Elon Musk and these CEOs of these huge companies. We have to then take the power back to the people and say, look, what is the purpose? If the purpose is to look after people and planet, we then move away from worshipping money and worshipping the middlemen and these people of power and say, no, we distribute the responsibility to all people locally. We move towards a different concept of money, different concept of localized community banking. And then suddenly the world reorganizes itself and it starts to change.
Philip there says, James, that there is a kind of hope for a sense that a change in perspective, a change in aims and goals on a mass scale could influence those people who have the reins right now, or at least potentially bring us into a position where we might be able to gain a sense of doubt, or a sense that actually these, as you call them, middlemen, are not the purveyors of truth that we might hold them up to be in our current way of living. Do you think there is hope for a change in the way in which the values of tech worship, or whatever you want to call it, might shift in the coming years?
Yeah, I think it is starting to change already. You mentioned Sam Altman and OpenAI. They actually have quite an interesting, different corporate structure. They're not a typical company. They have their profit capped, and he has talked about the leader of OpenAI in the future being someone who's elected. There's a public vote on it. I think we've been on a journey for the last 6, 7, or 8 years about asking questions about digital tech and about whether it is sort of a fundamental good thing for the world. I think it sort of was accepted that way for a long time, and then we had lots of privacy scandals, a lot of questions around elections and things like that, and people started to ask questions. People have started to say, what's the best way to run these companies? What's the best way of regulating these companies? And I think you're seeing more and more when I speak to tech founders, you don't just hear, here's our great product. You start to think about, oh, here's the way in which it's good for society, or here's the way in which we're thinking about safety from the outset. And I think that's because of a lot of the public pressure to make these products work from the beginning, rather than once they've become trillion-dollar companies and then to start reining things in a little bit.
Okay, so I suppose that I spoke earlier about guardrails. There are guardrails, of course, in government that are about limitations of how much research you can do into certain technologies. And there's been an open letter signed by many people, including Sam Altman, in fact, saying that there should be more guarding, which seems ironic considering he is one of the kind of progenitors of this movement, guarding against the risks that it might bring down the line. But there's another guardrail, which is, I think, Philip, what you're getting at, which is a social guardrail, which is about, if we have a stronger idea of who we are, then we are less at existential risk. And I suppose that's the thing that I want to come back to here and really dig into, because I think it does lead into questions of covenant and society and the way in which we actually all work together to create the world we want to live in. How do we have to start thinking about ourselves and our uniqueness as humans that will distinguish us and delineate us from technology as we become more and more singular?
It's incredible. Every time we have a chat, we're on the same way. It's unbelievable, because what you just said is exactly what I've realised only in the last week or two. I've been doing a lot of work on covenant, and I used to think that a covenant was an agreement between different parties that they enter into voluntarily, but it's collaborative. But you said something which is what I realised. That's not what a covenant is. It's actually our DNA. It's actually understanding the way we truly are. So what we need to do is not see us against them, not the state against the market, not a competitive format. But what we need to do is educate and inspire, so people realize, no, we're all the same. We actually all care about each other. We all care about the planet. We care. We may not think it consciously. We have to consciously recognize that. And then suddenly you're not looking at a huge organization. You're looking at Elon Musk and these people actually saying, okay, I'm going to distribute power within my organization. I'm going to recognize that each part of it is separate and has to start to thrive. And we move away from the focus on profit, which is meaningless. It's just a number. I'm an accountant, so I know a bit about how you measure profit. It's lit and GDP. All these things are complicated. And what you're saying, if we want to recognize that we actually must understand ourselves existentially, then we need to simplify these complicated numbers that we all focus on, because no one really understands how profit is worked out, because even the accountants manipulate it. There's no question. Profit, GDP, all of these things are not helping us to understand what we're really about. But if you start to come in and use a tech to measure very simple things, for example, there's a beautiful technology which I think could change the world, which hasn't, which is open electronic healthcare record. What that is, very simply, is a healthcare record which uses a standard format, so you can measure very simply a pulse or heart rate or a condition in a language that everyone understands. Now, it sounds very, very simple, much simpler than the complexities of ChatGPT. But just that alone, where you have a simple language for a medication or a healthcare plan or a condition, suddenly enables everybody in the world of healthcare to collaborate, to work together, to actually use all the information to save millions of lives. Never happened because money stands in the way of it, because once the focus is on profit, these simple things just get dropped. So we have to go back to using very simple, rather complicated, a computer that can wonderfully master the language. No, let's use language which takes the computer out, which enables us to actually, as humans, understand how other humans are feeling and how the planet is being damaged, how lands are being farmed healthily, and actually disempower the technology and use that to create a very, very simple language which takes the gatekeepers out that we all understand.